She came home earlier and found her world falling apart. Amidst betrayal and contempt, she was forced to start over without looking back. But fate had unexpected twists and challenges in store, testing her strength and determination. The experiences awaiting her would change everything forever. Before listening to this story of courage and resilience, don't forget to like and share this inspiring tale. The sun was setting on the horizon when Beth parked her military jeep in front of the house she shared with her husband Richard. After months of intense service abroad, she could barely contain her excitement about finally being home. The familiar scent of jasmine growing in the front garden enveloped her, bringing a sense of comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. With silent steps, the result of years of training, Beth approached the door. Her heart was beating fast, anticipating the moment of reunion. She hadn't told Richard about her early arrival, wanting to surprise him. Turning the key in the lock carefully, Beth entered. The house was strangely silent, but a dim light coming from the bedroom caught her attention. As she approached, muffled voices reached her trained ears. Her military instinct alerted her. Something wasn't right. When she opened the bedroom door, the scene before her eyes hit her like a punch to the stomach. Richard, her husband, was in the arms of another woman. The initial shock gave way to a sharp pain, as if all the war wounds she had ever suffered had reopened at once. Richard. Beth's voice came out more as a whisper than the firm order she was accustomed to giving. The couple separated abruptly. The woman, whom Beth recognized as Carla, a neighbor, pulled the sheet to cover herself, while Richard got up, his face a mixture of surprise and guilt. "Beth, you came back early," stammered Richard, trying to find the right words. Beth remained motionless, her rigid posture contrasting with the whirlwind of emotions that consumed her inside. Years of military training helped her maintain her composure, even as her world crumbled around her. "Explain yourself," she ordered, her voice now firm and authoritative. Richard began to dress hurriedly, while Carla remained silent, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Look, Beth, it's not what it looks like," Richard began, but was interrupted by a cutting look from Beth. "Don't you dare lie to me, Richard. I'm seeing exactly what it is." Realizing there was no way out, Richard changed tactics. His face contorted into an expression of contempt that Beth had never seen before. "You want to know? It's exactly what it looks like. I'm tired of pretending everything is okay between us," he shot back, his voice laden with bitterness. "You're never here, Beth. Always on some mission, always away. What did you expect me to do?" Richard's words hit her like bullets, but Beth refused to show weakness. Her eyes narrowed, assessing the man in front of her as if he were an enemy on the battlefield. "I expected loyalty, Richard. Respect. The same values I swore to defend," she responded, her voice cold as steel. Richard let out a humorless laugh. "Loyalty to a ghost. You're more soldier than woman, Beth. Carla." He gestured toward the woman still huddled in bed. "Carla is here. She understands me, supports me. Something you never did." Each word was like a knife to Beth's heart, but she remained firm. Years of military discipline prevented her from falling. "High apart right there." "I understand," she said simply, her voice devoid of emotion. "So this is how it ends." Turning to leave the room, Beth was surprised by Carla's voice. "Beth, I'm sorry, we didn't want it to be like this." Beth turned slowly, facing the woman with a look that could freeze the desert. "Save your apologies, Carla. They mean nothing to me." Leaving the bedroom, Beth went straight to the living room closet, where she kept an emergency backpack, a habit acquired during her missions. As she grabbed the bag, she heard Richard's footsteps behind her. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice now calmer, almost regretful. "What does it look like I'm doing, Richard? I'm leaving." "Beth, wait. We can talk about this. It doesn't have to be like this," he tried to argue, but Beth interrupted him with an abrupt gesture. "Talk? Now you want to talk? After I find you in our bed with another woman?" She shook her head, incredulous. "There's nothing to talk about, Richard. It's over." Richard, realizing he was losing control of the situation, let his anger surface again. You know what? Just go. It's better this way. No man wants to be married to a woman like you, always absent, always putting duty above everything and everyone. Richard's words hit her like a physical blow, but Beth didn't show it. Instead, she looked at him with a look of pure determination. You're right about one thing, Richard. I always put my duty above everything, including you, apparently. My mistake was believing you would understand, that you would support me. I see now that I was wrong. With those words, Beth grabbed her keys and headed for the door. Before leaving, however, she turned one last time to Richard. I hope you and Carla are very happy together. You deserve each other. And with that, she left, closing the door behind her with a soft click that echoed with the finality of a gunshot. Outside, Beth took a deep breath, feeling the cool night air on her face. She looked at the quiet street, at the neighbors' houses, everything so familiar and yet so strange now. For a moment, she felt completely lost, a sensation she had never experienced even in the most hostile terrains where she had served. But then, as she always did in difficult situations, Beth straightened her shoulders and raised her chin. She was a soldier, after all. She had survived battles, ambushes, life or death situations. This was just another obstacle to overcome. With renewed determination, Beth began walking down the street, her backpack firmly attached to her back. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew that wherever it was, she would face whatever came her way with the same courage and resilience she had always shown. As she walked, the lights in the houses began to turn on one by one, like stars appearing in the night sky. Beth couldn't help but notice the irony. As families gathered for dinner, she was moving away from the only thing she thought she had as a home. Her steps unconsciously led her to a small park at the end of the street. There, sitting on a solitary bench, Beth finally allowed the tears to come. They weren't tears of weakness, but of liberation. She cried for the betrayal, for the pain, but also for the understanding that this was the end of one chapter in her life and the beginning of another. As the tears dried on her face, Beth observed the starry sky above. The same stars that had guided her on so many missions now seemed to offer a silent comfort. She knew that no matter what happened next, she would find her way. She always did. With one last deep sigh, Beth got up from the bench. It was time to find a place to spend the night and plan her next steps. After all, if there was one thing the army had taught her, it was the importance of always having a plan B. Walking back to the main street, Beth noticed a light on in a house she knew well. It was the residence of Jake, a neighbor whom she always considered somewhat arrogant and carefree. They never had much contact, but at that moment, any familiar face seemed like a safe harbor. With hesitation, Beth approached the door. She took a deep breath, preparing for what could be another difficult moment in this endless night. Then, with the same courage that had led her to face much more dangerous situations, she raised her hand and knocked. The sound of the knock echoed through the quiet night. Beth waited, feeling a mixture of nervousness and exhaustion. After a few moments that seemed like an eternity, the door opened, revealing Jake. He was dressed casually with a faded t-shirt and jeans, contrasting with the always impeccable image Beth had of him. His eyes widened slightly at the sight of her. "Beth, what are you doing here at this hour?" he asked, his voice a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Beth hesitated for a moment, struggling to find the right words. "Jake, I need a place to stay tonight. I had some problems at home and—" Before she could finish, Jake opened the door wider, a mischievous smile forming on his lips. "The famous soldier needs help. That's news." The comment caught her by surprise, but Beth maintained her composure. "Look, if it's an inconvenience, I can look for somewhere else." "Relax, soldier girl," said Jake, his tone now softer. "Come in. Mi casa es su casa, as our neighbors say." Beth entered, observing the interior of the house. It was surprisingly cozy, with modern furniture and a minimalist decor that contrasted with Jake's extravagant personality. "So," Jake began, closing the door behind her, "what happened? Did the barracks catch fire?" Beth sighed, placing her backpack on the floor. "No, nothing like that. It's personal." Jake observed her for a moment, his penetrating gaze as if trying to decipher a puzzle. "Let me guess. trouble in paradise. The accuracy of the guess surprised her. How did you? He shrugged, walking toward the kitchen. The walls are thin, soldier girl, and your husband isn't exactly discreet. Jake's words brought back the pain Beth was trying to contain. She sat on the couch, feeling the weight of the night's events. Want a drink? Offered Jake, returning from the kitchen with 2 bottles of beer. Normally, Beth would refuse. Alcohol was never her forte, especially in moments of stress, but that night the rules seemed different. Why not? She replied, accepting the bottle. Jake sat beside her, taking a sip of his beer before speaking. So, Richard finally showed. His claws, huh? Beth looked at him, surprised by his frankness. You knew? Everyone knew, Beth. Well, everyone except you, apparently. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. She took a long swig of beer, feeling the cold liquid go down her throat. Great. So I'm the idiot in the story. Jake shook his head. No, you're the one. Too busy saving the world to realize you have a jerk at home. There was a moment of silence between them. Beth reflected on Jake's words, realizing there was a strange truth to them. You know, continued Jake, I always wondered how someone like you ended up with someone like Richard. You seem so different. Beth let out a bitter laugh. We were young. He was sweet, attentive. He seemed to understand my vocation. I guess things change. People change, corrected Jake. Or maybe they just show who they really are over time. She looked at him, intrigued by his perspective. And who are you really, Jake? I always thought you were a carefree playboy. He smiled, a mischievous gleam in his eyes. And who said I'm not? But there's more to me than meets the eye, soldier girl. The constant use of the nickname bothered her, but Beth decided not to comment. After all, he was offering shelter when she needed it most. So, Jake continued, what's the plan now? Are you going to run back to the army? Beth frowned. It doesn't work like that. I have responsibilities, a career. Ah, yes, the grand military career, mocked Jake, but his tone was more provocative than malicious. I always wondered what drives someone to choose a life of orders and discipline. It's more than that, Beth defended herself. It's about serving something greater than ourselves, protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Jake observed her for a moment, his gaze intense. Noble, but who protects you, Beth? The question caught her off guard. For a moment, Beth found herself without words, an unusual feeling for her. I protect myself, she finally replied, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. Jake smiled, a smile that was a mixture of amusement and something Beth couldn't identify. Of course you do. The invincible soldier Beth, capable of facing armies but not an unfaithful husband. The word should have offended her, but strangely, Beth found herself laughing. It was a nervous laugh, almost hysterical but genuine. You have a peculiar way of comforting people, you know, she said between laughs. Jake shrugged, still smiling. Who said I'm trying to comfort you? Maybe I just like to provoke. Beth shook her head, feeling a strange lightness despite the events of the night. You're impossible, Jake. Thank you, I do my best, he replied with a wink. The rest of the night passed in a haze of provocative conversations and a few more beers. Jake, Beth discovered, was an excellent listener when he wanted to be. Between jokes and sarcastic comments, he let her vent, telling details of Richard's betrayal and how she felt. As the night progressed, Beth felt the weight of the day accumulating on her. Her eyes began to grow heavy, and she found herself struggling to maintain consciousness. Noticing her state, Jake got up. Come on, I'll show you the guest room. Looks like you need a good rest. Beth followed him down the hall, grateful for the offer. The room was simple but comfortable, with a large double bed and thick curtains that promised to block the morning light. Thank you, Jake, she said, her voice laden with sincerity. Not just for the room, but for, well, everything. He looked at her for a moment, his face softening into an expression Beth had never seen before. No need to thank me, soldier girl. Sometimes we all need a place to hide from the world for a while. With that, he turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Oh, and Beth, don't think this means I'm going to stop teasing you. Tomorrow is a new day, after all. Beth couldn't contain a smile. "I wouldn't expect anything different from you, Jake." When the door closed, Beth sat on the bed, letting out a long sigh. The day had been an emotional roller coaster, and she felt exhausted physically and mentally. Lying down, she looked at the ceiling, thinking about how her life had changed dramatically in just a few hours. The pain of Richard's betrayal was still there, pulsing in her chest, but now it was accompanied by a strange feeling of possibility. As sleep enveloped her, Beth found herself thinking of Jake. He was irritating, provocative, and completely different from anyone she had ever lived with. And yet, that night, he had been exactly what she needed. With these confused thoughts spinning in her mind, Beth finally succumbed to sleep, plunging into a deep, dreamless rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, she knew, but for the first time since discovering Richard's betrayal, Beth felt that perhaps, just maybe, things could be okay. Outside the room, Jake remained for a moment, listening to Beth's breathing calm as she fell asleep. An enigmatic smile played on his lips before he silently moved away, leaving the soldier to rest. Night advanced, and with it, the first seeds of a story that neither of them could predict were being planted. Fate, always unpredictable, had united them on that peculiar night, and only time would tell where that unexpected encounter would lead them. The sun had barely risen when Beth opened her eyes, her body responding to the military rhythm to which it had long been accustomed. For a brief moment, she felt disoriented, the unfamiliar room bringing a wave of confusion. Then, like a tsunami, the memories of the previous night hit her. Sitting up in bed, Beth took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. The pain of Richard's betrayal was still there, pulsing like an open wound, but now it was accompanied by an iron determination. She would not allow this to break her. With precise movements, the fruit of years of training, Beth made the bed and organized her few belongings. She decided that, after thanking Jake for his hospitality, she would look for a hotel to stay in while resolving her situation. Upon leaving the room, an unexpected aroma of freshly brewed coffee greeted her. Following the smell, Beth came upon a surprising scene. Jake, wearing only pajama pants, skillfully handling a frying pan in the kitchen. "Good morning, soldier girl," he said without turning around, as if he had a sixth sense for her presence. "I hope you like eggs and bacon." Beth blinked, momentarily speechless. "You cook?" Jake turned, a mischievous smile on his lips. "Surprised? Did you think I only knew how to order delivery?" "Honestly?" "Yes," Beth admitted, sitting at the kitchen counter. "Well, prepare for more surprises," he replied, placing a generously served plate in front of her. "Eating well is one of my many hidden talents." The aroma was tempting, and Beth realized she was hungry. Picking up the fork, she tried some of the eggs and couldn't contain a sound of approval. "This is really good," she admitted, surprised. Jake feigned offense. "No need to sound so shocked. I have many qualities beyond my stunning beauty and irresistible charm." Beth rolled her eyes but couldn't avoid a small smile. There was something comforting about the way Jake treated her, without pity, without judgments, just with his usual irreverent humor. As they ate, a comfortable silence settled between them. Beth found herself observing Jake more carefully. Under the morning light, she noticed details she had never perceived before. A small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his eyes wrinkled slightly when he smiled, the relaxed way he moved around. The kitchen. "So," Jake broke the silence, "what's the plan now, General?" Beth frowned at the nickname but decided to ignore it. "I'm going to look for a hotel today. I don't want to abuse your hospitality." Jake looked at her for a moment, an indecipherable expression on his face. "You know you can stay here if you want. I have plenty of space and, frankly, a different company wouldn't hurt." The offer caught Beth by surprise. "Are you sure? I don't want to be a bother." "Relax, soldier girl, consider this my good deed of the year," he replied with a smile. "Besides, I'm curious to see what it's like to live with someone who probably wakes up before the sun rises every day." Beth hesitated. Staying at Jake's house wasn't in her plans, but the idea of facing an impersonal hotel suddenly seemed less attractive. Besides, there was something in Jake's presence that made her feel lighter. "All right," she finally agreed, "but only until I resolve my situation." "Deal," Jake smiled, extending his hand as if closing a business deal. Beth shook it, feeling a strange electric current at the touch. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activities. Beth made some calls, informing her command about the need for a few days of personal leave. To her surprise, her superior was understanding, granting her a week off. Meanwhile, Jake moved around the house, making small adjustments to accommodate his new guest. Beth observed him with curiosity, noting how he seemed perfectly at ease with the unusual situation. "You know," Jake commented as he reorganized some books on a shelf, "I always wondered how someone like you ends up choosing a military career." Beth, who was helping organize some extra sheets, stopped for a moment. "What do you mean by someone like me?" Jake turned, his eyes meeting hers. "You know, someone so intense, determined. Doesn't seem the type to simply follow orders without questioning." She pondered for a moment before answering. "I think that's precisely why I chose the army. I wanted to channel that intensity into something greater than myself." Jake murmured, seeming genuinely interested. "And was it worth it?" The EI question caught her off guard. Beth found herself reflecting on her career, her choices, the sacrifices she had made. "Most of the time, yes," she answered honestly. "There are difficult moments, of course, but when you know you've made a difference, that you've saved lives, there's no feeling like it." Jake observed her for a long moment, his intense gaze making Beth feel strangely exposed. "Fascinating," he finally said. "You're a box of surprises, soldier girl." Before Beth could respond, the doorbell rang, breaking the moment. "Ah, that must be the pizza I ordered," Jake said, heading for the door. "Pizza? But we just had breakfast," Beth protested, confused. Jake gave her an amused look over his shoulder. "Who said it's 4 now? I'm preparing for later. After all, you never know when a hungry soldier might raid the fridge." Beth couldn't contain a laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. Jake was, without a doubt, the most unpredictable person she had ever met. When he returned with the pizza box, Beth noticed a small envelope attached to it. "What's this?" she asked, curious. Jake shrugged, a mysterious smile on his lips. "Oh, just a little surprise I ordered for you, but you can only open it after dinner." Beth raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You know I hate surprises, right?" "Exactly why I love surprising you," he replied with a wink. The rest of the day passed in a strange dance of domesticity and mutual teasing. Beth found herself laughing more than she thought possible, given her situation. There was something in Jake's presence that made her feel alive. As night approached, Beth felt a mixture of anxiety and curiosity about the surprise. Part of her wanted to keep her defenses high, to remember that she barely knew Jake. But another part, a part she didn't fully recognize, yearned to discover more about this enigmatic man. While helping Jake prepare dinner, which to her surprise was not the pizza, Beth found herself thinking about how her life had changed dramatically in less than 24 hours. From a betrayed wife to a guest of a neighbor she barely knew. It was surreal. "A penny for your thoughts," Jake said, interrupting her reflections. Beth looked at him, a small smile forming on her lips, just thinking about how unpredictable life can be. Jake smiled back, a mischievous gleam in his eyes. "Well, soldier girl, you haven't seen anything yet. The night is young, and I have a feeling many surprises are still to come." With these enigmatic words, he turned his attention back to the stove, leaving Beth with a strange feeling of anticipation. Something told her that this night and the days to come would be very different from anything she had ever experienced before. And for the first time in a long time, Beth found herself looking forward to the unknown. Dinner passed in a surprisingly pleasant atmosphere. Jake had prepared a mushroom risotto that rivaled the best restaurants Beth had ever frequented. The conversation flowed naturally, oscillating between light topics and moments of unexpected depth. "So," Jake began, refilling the wine glasses, "have you ever thought about leaving the army, following a career less risky?" Beth pondered, for a moment, twirling the glass between her fingers. There have been moments, of course, especially when things got really tough on a mission, but I always came back to the same conclusion. It's who I am. Jake observed her with a penetrating, "Look, and who are you, Beth? Beyond the uniform, I mean." The question caught her off guard. For an instant, Beth found herself without words, an unusual sensation for her. "I don't know if anyone has ever asked me that before," she finally admitted. "Not even Richard?" Jake asked, his voice soft, but with a hint of curiosity. Beth felt a pang in her chest at the mention of her ex-husband's name. "Richard. He always saw me as the military wife. I don't think he was ever very interested in seeing beyond that." Jake nodded, a gleam of understanding in his eyes. "Well, why don't we find out together? After all, we have a surprise waiting, remember?" With an enigmatic smile, he got up and went to the kitchen, returning with the small envelope that had arrived with the pizza earlier. "Ready for your mission, soldier girl?" he asked, extending the envelope to her. Beth took it with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Upon opening it, she found 2 tickets to a jazz show at a local club, scheduled for that very night. "Jazz?" she asked, surprised. Jake smiled, seeming satisfied with her reaction. "I thought it would be a good way for you to disconnect a bit. Besides, I've always wanted to see how a military person behaves in a bohemian environment." Beth laughed, shaking her head. "You'd be surprised. We military folks know how to have fun too, you know?" "That I want to see," Jake replied with a challenging gleam in his eyes. "So what do you say? Are you ready for a night of music and, who knows, some dancing?" For a moment, Beth hesitated. Part of her wanted to withdraw, to deal with her emotions in private. But another part, a part she didn't fully recognize, yearned for this distraction, for this chance to rediscover herself. "You know what? Let's go," she decided, a smile forming on her lips. The jazz club was a cozy place, with low lighting and an intimate atmosphere. The soft sound of the saxophone filled the environment, creating an almost magical aura. Beth immediately felt enveloped by the music, her body relaxing in a way that hadn't happened for a long time. Jake guided her to a table near the stage, ordering drinks for both. As they watched the band play, Beth found herself studying her companion. Under the soft light of the club, Jake seemed different, softer, more accessible. "What is it?" he asked, noticing her look. "Nothing," she replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "I'm just trying to understand how someone who seemed so superficial can have such refined taste in music." Jake feigned offense, but his eyes shone with amusement. "Ah, soldier girl, you still have a lot to learn about me." As the night progressed, Beth was surprised by how much she was enjoying herself. The music, the drinks, Jake's unexpectedly pleasant company. Everything contributed to creating an atmosphere of lightness she hadn't experienced in years. In a particularly engaging moment of the music, Jake stood up, extending his hand to her. "How about a dance, soldier girl? I promise not to step on your feet much." Beth hesitated for a second, but something in Jake's smile made her accept. Soon they were on the dance floor, moving to the soft rhythm of the jazz. To her surprise, Jake was an excellent dancer, guiding her with confidence and grace. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" she asked, genuinely impressed. "I have many hidden talents," he replied with a wink. "But the truth? My grandmother taught me. She said a man who knows how to dance never stays alone." The revelation caught Beth by surprise. It was a glimpse of a Jake she didn't know, deeper and more complex than she had imagined. As they danced, Beth found herself relaxing more and more in his arms. There was an undeniable chemistry between them, a connection that went beyond words. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply feel the music, the movement, Jake's proximity. When the music ended, they remained close for a moment longer than necessary. Beth could feel Jake's heart beating rapidly, mirroring her own. "Beth," Jake murmured, his voice hoarse. But before he could complete the thought, a commotion near the bar caught the attention of both. A group of men, visibly drunk, was causing trouble. Without thinking twice, Beth moved away from Jake and headed toward the group. Her military instinct took over, and in a matter of minutes she had diffused the situation with a mixture of authority and diplomacy that left all present impressed. When she returned to Jake, he was looking at her with an expression of admiration and something else, something she couldn't fully decipher. "That," he said, pointing to the scene that had just unfolded, "is who you are, Beth. Not just a soldier, but someone who cares, who acts, who makes a difference, even when not in uniform." Jake's words hit Beth deeply. It was as if for the first time someone really saw her, not just the military person, not just the wife, but Beth in her entirety. The rest of the night passed in a blur of music, laughter, and deep conversations. When they finally left the club in the early hours of the morning, Beth felt lighter than she had in years. On the way back home, walking side by side down the deserted streets, Jake took her hand. The gesture was simple, but laden with meaning. Beth didn't push him away. When they reached the door of Jake's house, they stopped, a silence laden with expectation hanging between them. "Thank you for the night," Beth said softly. "It was unexpected." Jake smiled, that smile she now realized was reserved only for her. "Unexpected is good." "Unexpected is great," she replied, feeling her heart race. For a moment, they stood there, still, the air between them charged with possibilities. Then slowly Jake leaned toward her. Beth closed her eyes, feeling his breath mingle with hers. But the kiss didn't come. Instead, Jake placed a soft kiss on her forehead, a gesture so tender it almost broke Beth's heart. "Good night, soldier girl," he murmured. "Dream of jazz." With that, he opened the door, letting Beth enter first. As she headed to the guest room, Beth felt overcome by a mixture of emotions, gratitude, confusion, and something else, something she wasn't ready to name yet. Lying in bed, reviewing the events of the night, Beth realized that something fundamental had changed, not just in her situation, but in herself. It was as if for the first time in years, she was really waking up to life. With a smile on her lips, she finally fell asleep, the soft sounds of jazz still echoing in her ears, and the sensation of Jake's almost kiss still tingling on her skin. The dawn brought with it a sense of renewal for Beth. She woke before sunrise as usual, but this time she didn't feel compelled to follow her usual military routine. Instead, she found herself wandering around the quiet house, absorbing the events of the previous night. The kitchen still bore traces of the shared dinner with Jake, a forgotten wine glass, the faint aroma of spices in the air. Beth smiled as she remembered the conversations, the laughter, the dance. It was as if, for the first time in years, she had experienced life outside the rigid limits she had established for herself. Deciding to take advantage of the morning quiet, Beth prepared a cup of coffee and went out to the small garden behind the house. The sky was beginning to clear, painting the horizon with soft shades of pink and orange. Sitting on a weathered wooden bench, she let her mind wander. She thought of Richard, of the betrayal, of the pain that still pulsed in her chest. But surprisingly, the anguish she expected to feel was dampened, as if recent events had created a protective barrier around her. Her thoughts inevitably turned to Jake, the enigmatic neighbor who, in less than 48 hours, had become what? A friend? A confidant? Something more? Beth didn't know how to define it, and this uncertainty, instead of frightening her, intrigued her. "Early riser as always, huh, soldier girl?" Jake's voice pulled her from her reverie. He was standing at the back door, hair disheveled and eyes still sleepy, but with that characteristic smile on his lips. "Force of habit," Beth replied, raising her cup in a silent toast. Jake joined her on the bench, bringing his own cup of coffee. For a few moments they remained in silence, watching the sunrise. "You know," Jake began, his voice soft, "I never thought I'd see the day when I'd appreciate waking up so early. But this is beautiful." Beth looked at him sideways, noting how the soft morning light softened his features, giving him an almost vulnerable appearance. "Sometimes the best things in life are where we least expect them," she replied, surprising herself with the depth of her own words. Jake turned to her, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made Beth's heart race. Speaking from personal experience, soldier girl? Before Beth could respond, the strident sound of a horn broke the moment. A car had stopped in front of the house, and from it emerged a familiar figure. Richard. Beth felt her body stiffen instantly. Beside her, Jake stood up, instinctively, placing himself between her and the direction of the house. "Want me to handle this?" he asked, his voice laden with protection. Beth took a deep breath, gathering all the strength she had cultivated over the years. "No, I need to face this. But thank you." With determined steps, Beth walked around the house, Jake following closely. When they reached the front, Richard was already at the door, his face a mixture of anger and confusion. "Beth, what the hell are you doing here?" he demanded, throwing a furious look at Jake. "I think I lost the right to ask you that question when I caught you in our bed with someone else, didn't I?" Beth replied, her voice surprisingly calm. Richard seemed to wilt a bit at her words. "Look, I came to apologize. What I did was wrong, I know. Can we talk? In private?" He cast another significant look at Jake. Beth felt Jake's reassuring presence behind her, giving her strength. "No, Richard. Anything you have to say to me, you can say right here." Richard ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "All right, I'm sorry, Beth, really. What I did, what I said, there's no justification. I was frustrated, feeling alone, but that's no excuse. I want to fix things. Come back home." Richard's words hung in the air for a moment. Beth could feel the weight of them, the familiarity, the promise of returning to a life she knew so well. But something had changed. She had changed. "Richard," she began, her voice firm, "I accept your apologies, but I can't come back. Not now. Perhaps never." "But Beth," Richard tried to argue, but Beth interrupted him with a gesture. "In the last few days, I've rediscovered parts of myself that I had forgotten, or perhaps never really known. I need to explore this, understand? I need to discover who I am outside, our marriage outside the army, and I can't do that by going back to you." Richard was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. Then, with a defeated sigh, he nodded. "I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. You were always stronger than me, Beth. I hope you find what you're looking for." With one last look at Beth and a reluctant nod to Jake, Richard turned and left. Beth watched him leave, feeling a mixture of relief and melancholy. When Richard's car disappeared around the corner, Jake gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" Beth turned to him, a small smile forming on her lips. "You know what? I think I am. For the first time in a long time, I really am." Jake smiled back, his eyes shining with something that looked like admiration. "So what does the fearless soldier girl plan to do now?" Beth looked at the horizon, feeling a wave of possibilities opening before her. "I'm not sure, but I think I want to find out who I am when I'm not following orders or meeting expectations. I want to explore." "Well," Jake said, his tone light but with a touch of seriousness, "if you need a guide in this exploration, I'm available. After all, I'm an expert at living outside the rules." Beth laughed, feeling light and free as she hadn't felt in years. "Careful, Jake. I might take you up on that offer." "I'm counting on it, soldier girl," he replied with a wink. As they went back inside the house, Beth felt a wave of anticipation. The future was uncertain, full of unknown possibilities. But for the first time in a long time, this uncertainty didn't frighten her. On the contrary, it excited her. With Jake by her side, laughing at some silly joke he had just made, Beth realized she was ready for whatever came next. She was ready to rediscover herself, to explore, to live. And maybe, in the process, she could discover not only who she was, but also what it really meant to love and be loved. The path ahead was long and unknown, but Beth was eager for every step of this new journey. The days that followed brought a surprisingly pleasant routine for Beth. Jake's house, previously a temporary refuge, became a space of discovery and reflection. Each morning brought with it the promise of something new, a sensation Beth hadn't experienced since her first days in the army. On a particularly sunny afternoon, Jake surprised Beth with an unusual proposal. "How about a painting, class?" he suggested, appearing at the guest room door with an easel and a box of paints. Beth raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You paint? Me? No," Jake laughed. "But I know a great teacher. I thought it would be a good way for you to explore your creative side. You know, something completely different from military discipline." The idea was so unexpected that Beth found herself accepting without hesitation. Hours later, she found herself in a small studio in the center of the city, before a blank canvas, brush in hand. The teacher, a gray-haired gentleman with a gentle smile, encouraged students to paint freely, without worrying about techniques or perfection. "Paint what you feel, not what you see," he said. Beth hesitated initially, years of military training demanding precision and planning, but gradually, guided by the teacher's soft words and Jake's encouraging smiles, she allowed herself to let go. Vibrant colors began to take shape on the canvas. Strong strokes mixed with soft brush strokes, creating an abstract but deeply emotive image. Beth was surprised by the intensity of her feelings as she painted, each color seeming to represent a different part of her recent journey. At the end of the class, looking at her creation, Beth felt a wave of emotion. The painting wasn't technically perfect, but it perfectly captured the whirlwind of feelings she had been experiencing. "It's beautiful," Jake commented, observing the canvas with admiration. "I never imagined you had this hidden talent, soldier girl." Beth smiled, a mixture of pride and surprise in her voice. "Neither did I. It's amazing how we can surprise ourselves when we allow ourselves to try new things." On the way back home, Jake suggested a detour to a nearby park. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with hues that resembled Beth's painting. Sitting on a bench by the edge of a small lake, Beth found herself reflecting on the changes in her life. "No," she began, her voice soft. "I always thought my life was mapped out. The army, the marriage to Richard, everything seemed so right, so defined. Now looking back, I realize how limited I was by these expectations." Jake was watching her attentively, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the sunset. "And how do you feel now?" Beth thought for a moment before answering. "Free, scared sometimes, but mainly free. It's as if I were discovering an entire world that was always there, but that I never allowed myself to see." "You're amazing, Beth," Jake said, his voice laden with admiration. "Most people, faced with what you've been through, would close up. But you're blossoming." His words touched Beth deeply. She turned to face him, noting how the evening light softened his features, highlighting a beauty that went beyond the physical. "Much of this is thanks to you, you know," she admitted, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Your way of seeing life, your willingness to help me, has been fundamental in this journey." Jake smiled, that smile that Beth was beginning to adore. "I'm just giving back, soldier girl. You've shown me a strength and courage that I didn't know existed. You're making me want to be a better person." The moment between them was charged with emotion. Beth felt her heart race, a mixture of nervousness and anticipation, taking hold of her. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she leaned toward Jake. This time there were no interruptions. Their lips met in a soft kiss, full of promise and possibilities. It was a brief moment, but laden with meaning. When they separated, both were smiling, a mixture of joy and surprise in their gazes. "That was—" Jake began, but Beth interrupted him with a finger on his lips. "Unexpected?" she completed, a smile playing on her lips. "I think I'm beginning to like unexpected things." They laughed together, the tension of the moment dissipating into a feeling of comfort and intimacy. The way back home was filled with light conversations and looks laden with meaning. Upon arriving, Beth felt as if she were seeing Jake's house with new eyes. It was no longer just a temporary refuge, but a place where she was discovering new facets of herself. That night, lying in her bed, Beth reflected on the day. The painting. Class, the walk in the park, the kiss. Each moment seemed like a piece fitting into a puzzle that she didn't even know she was putting together. For the first time in a long time, Beth fell asleep with a smile on her lips, eager for what tomorrow might bring. Her life, which before seemed so rigidly defined, was now a blank canvas ready to be filled with the vibrant colors of new experiences and emotions. And at the center of this new painting, shining with intense colors, was Jake. No longer just a neighbor or a friend, but someone who was becoming a fundamental part of her new life. With these comforting thoughts, Beth surrendered to sleep, her dreams filled with vibrant colors and infinite possibilities. The dawn brought with it an atmosphere of expectation. Beth woke feeling light, the memories of the previous day still vivid in her mind. The kiss with Jake, the painting class, everything seemed the beginning of something new and exciting. As she prepared for another day, Beth heard a soft knock on her door. It was Jake, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee. "Good morning, soldier girl," he smiled, handing her one of the cups. "I thought we could have coffee together today." Beth accepted the cup with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Jake. That's very kind." They sat on the small veranda of the room, observing the garden that was beginning to awaken with the first rays of sun. For a few moments, they remained in a comfortable silence, just enjoying each other's company. So, Jake finally broke the silence. "About yesterday?" Beth felt her heart race. "Yes? It was good," he said, a shy smile playing on his lips. "Very good, actually." Beth couldn't contain a smile. "I agree, it was unexpected but good." Jake put his cup aside and turned to face her completely. "Beth, I like you. A lot. And I don't want to rush things or complicate your life." But before he could finish, Beth's phone rang, interrupting the moment. She looked at the device, recognizing the number of her superior in the army. "I'm sorry. I need to answer this," she said, casting an apologetic look at Jake. The conversation was brief, but Beth's countenance visibly changed during the call. When she hung up, her eyes were full of concern. "What happened?" Jake asked, noting her expression. Beth took a deep breath before responding. "It was my commander. There was a situation. They need me for an urgent rescue mission. A team got trapped in hostile territory and..." She stopped, noticing the change in Jake's gaze. There was concern there, but also something more. Disappointment? "When do you leave?" he asked, his voice trying to maintain neutrality. "Tonight," Beth responded, feeling a knot form in her stomach. "Jake, He raised his hand, gently interrupting her. "You don't need to explain, Beth. I understand. It's who you are. It's what you do." But there was a tension in his voice that Beth couldn't ignore. The light and promising moment of minutes, ego seemed to have completely dissipated. The following hours passed in a blur of preparations. Beth gathered her belongings, made necessary calls, and prepared mentally for the mission ahead. Jake was nearby, offering silent help, but the air between them was charged with unspoken words. When the time came to leave, Beth found herself hesitant at the front door facing Jake. Thank you for everything, Jake," she said, her voice laden with emotion. "These days here with you meant a lot to me." Jake nodded, a sad smile on his lips. "To me too, soldier girl. Just come back safe, okay?" Beth felt an impulse to hug him, to say more, to promise she would return, and they would explore whatever was being born between them. But years of military training made her contain herself. Instead, she just nodded, adjusting the strap of her backpack on her shoulder. "I will return," she promised, her voice firm. With one last look, Beth turned and walked toward the car that was waiting for her. As she moved away, she couldn't help but look in the rearview mirror, seeing Jake standing at the door watching her leave. On the way to the base, Beth found herself struggling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she felt the familiar adrenaline of an important mission, the sense of duty that always guided her actions. On the other, there was a new feeling of loss, of interrupted opportunities. Upon arriving at the base, Beth was immediately involved in the final preparations for the mission. Briefings, equipment checks, strategy reviews, all this helped to focus her mind, temporarily pushing away thoughts about Jake and what could have been. However, As she prepared to board the helicopter that would take her to the mission zone, Beth couldn't avoid one last thought for the man who in such a short time had become so important in her life. "I will return," she murmured to herself, as a silent promise not only to Jake, but to the new life she was beginning to glimpse. With Feis. One last determined sigh, Beth boarded, leaving behind the city, Jake, and the possibilities of a different future. Ahead was the unknown, the danger, and the mission for which she had been trained. As the helicopter took off, taking her away from everything she had discovered in the last few days, Beth clung to the hope that, when all this was over, there would be a way back. A way not just home, but to Jake and to the new Beth she was just beginning to discover. The sound of the rotors drowned out any other noise, but in her mind, Beth could clearly hear Jake's voice, calling her "soldier girl," with that affectionate tone that had become so familiar. With that memory warming her heart, she prepared to face whatever might come. The helicopter cut through the night sky, carrying Beth and her team to the heart of the mission. The briefing had been clear. A reconnaissance team was trapped in a hostile area, surrounded by enemy forces. Beth's mission was to lead the rescue operation, extract the trapped soldiers, and return safely. As she observed the dark landscape below, Beth couldn't help but let her thoughts wander to Jake. The expression on his face when she left, a mixture of concern and something that seemed like disappointment, was still vivid in her mind. "Focus, Daniels," she murmured to herself, forcing herself to turn her attention to the mission ahead. The helicopter landed in a clearing a few kilometers from the extraction point. Beth's team moved quickly and silently through the dense vegetation, guided by the coordinates provided by military intelligence. As they approached the location, the distant sounds of gunfire and explosions began to fill the air. Beth felt the familiar discharge of adrenaline, her senses sharpened and alert for any sign of danger. "Alpha Team position," she whispered into her communicator. 200 meters northeast, Commander," came the response. "We have visual on the target. The situation is critical." Beth signaled for her team to advance. As they approached, the scene revealed itself. The reconnaissance team was entrenched in a small building, surrounded by hostile forces. The crossfire was intense. "Let's create a diversion," Beth ordered. "Bravo team, flank from the east. Alpha, with me from the west. Let's open a corridor for extraction." The plan was executed with military precision. Beth led the attack, her mind focused exclusively on the mission. Years of training and field experience guided each movement, each decision. The heat of battle. Beth found herself facing an enemy combatant in hand-to-hand combat. As she fought, an unexpected image of Jake flashed in her mind. For a brief second, she hesitated, almost costing her dearly. "Damn, Beth, focus," she reprimanded herself, recovering in time to subdue the opponent. With the extraction corridor open, Beth led the rescue team to the trapped soldiers. "Come on, come on, come on," she shouted, covering the retreat as the wounded men were carried out of the building. That's when everything changed. A warning cry sounded, and Beth saw a grenade launcher pointed in her direction. There was no time to think, only to act. In an instinctive movement, she threw herself over the nearest soldier, protecting him with her own body. The explosion was deafening. Beth felt a sharp pain in her back and legs, and the world around her began to spin. Distant voices shouted her name, hands dragged her away from danger, but everything seemed to be happening in slow motion. As she was carried to the extraction helicopter, struggling to maintain consciousness, Beth found herself thinking not of the mission, not of her duty, but of Jake, of his smile, his affectionate teasing, of the kiss they had shared. "Jake," she murmured, her voice almost inaudible under the sound of the rotors and gunfire. As the helicopter took off, taking her back to the base, Beth struggled against the darkness that threatened to envelop her. She thought of the promise she had made to herself to return, to explore whatever was being born between her and Jake. "I will return," she whispered, clinging to this promise as if it were a lifeline. "I have to return." The sound of the helicopter rotors mingled with the constant beep of medical monitors. Beth floated between consciousness and unconsciousness, fragments of memories and dreams mixing in her feverish mind. She saw Jake, smiling at her in his kitchen. She saw Richard, his face contorted with anger and regret. She saw her team members, shouting orders and warnings during the mission. And somehow, amid all this chaos, she saw herself. Not the soldier, not the betrayed wife, but simply Beth, a woman on the verge of a new life. The helicopter landed at the advanced medical base with a jolt that brought Beth momentarily back to reality. She felt gentle hands moving her, urgent voices discussing her condition. Words like surgery and transfusion and critical floated around her. Before darkness enveloped her completely, Beth gathered her last strength to murmur a single word: Jake. Then the world disappeared, and Beth plunged into a deep, dreamless sleep, her fate uncertain, hovering between the life she knew and the life she had barely begun to glimpse. Meanwhile, miles away, in a house now strangely empty, Jake looked at the phone, waiting for a call that they feared would never come. Fear and concern consumed him, but along with them was a fierce determination. He would wait for Beth no matter how long it took. "Come back to me, soldier girl," he whispered to the silence of the night. "Just come back." The rhythmic sound, Gov heart monitors filled Beth's ears when she finally began to awaken. Her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the soft light of the hospital room. The pain in her body was a constant presence but distant, numbed by medications. "Welcome back, Commander Daniels," a familiar voice greeted her. Beth turned her head with effort, finding the concerned but relieved gaze of her superior, Colonel Hayes. "The mission?" she managed to murmur, her throat dry and rough. Colonel Hayes smiled softly. "Successful, thanks to you. All men were extracted safely. You saved many lives, Beth." Relief flooded Beth, but was quickly replaced by a wave of questions. "How long?" "You've been unconscious for 2 weeks, the colonel replied, his voice softening. "Your injuries were serious, but you're strong. The doctors are optimistic about your complete recovery. 2 weeks. The words echoed in Beth's mind. 2 weeks lost. 2 weeks away from Jake, she whispered, almost involuntarily. Colonel Hayes frowned, confused. "Pardon?" Beth shook her head slightly, trying to organize her thoughts. "Nothing, sir. There's someone I need to contact." The colonel nodded understandingly. "Of course, as soon as the doctors give authorization for visits, you can make your calls. For now, focus on recovering." In the days that followed, Beth found herself divided between two worlds. On one hand, there was the military world she knew so well, briefings about the mission, medical reports, visits from team members. On the other, there was a new world, one she had barely had time to explore before being torn from it. Each time she closed her eyes, Beth saw Jake's face. His teasing smile, his gentle eyes, the way he looked at her as if she were more than just a soldier. The longing she felt was almost physical, a tightness in her chest that not even the painkillers could alleviate. Finally, after a week of recovery, Beth received permission to make calls. With a racing heart, she dialed Jake's number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each ring seemed like an eternity. Then finally, "Hello?" Jake's voice sounded from the other end of the line, a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Jake," Beth breathed, feeling tears form in her eyes. "It's me." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then, "Beth, my God, is it really you? Are you okay? Where are you?" Jake's words came out in a torrent, and Beth couldn't contain a smile despite the tears that now ran freely down her face. "I'm okay," she assured, "or at least I will be. I'm at the military hospital. The mission was complicated." "I was so worried," Jake admitted, his voice trembling. "No one would tell me anything. I didn't know if you... I'm here," Beth gently interrupted. "I promised I'd return, remember?" There was another moment of silence. Then Jake spoke, his voice laden with emotion. "Can I come see you?" Beth's heart jumped at the question. "Yes," she replied, without hesitation. "Please." They talked for a few more minutes, Beth providing the details of her location and visiting hours. When she finally hung up, she felt lighter than she had in weeks despite her physical injuries. The next day, Beth was restless, her eyes constantly turning to the door. When Jake finally appeared, it was as if all the air had been sucked from the room. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and unshaven, but his eyes shone when he saw her, a mixture of relief, joy, and something deeper that Beth didn't dare name. "Hi, soldier girl," he said softly, approaching the bed. "Hi," Beth replied, her voice almost a whisper. For a moment they just looked at each other, years of unspoken emotions passing between them. Then, as if he could no longer contain himself, Jake leaned in and gently hugged her, careful with her injuries. Beth melted into the embrace, burying her face in Jake's shoulder. The familiar aroma of his cologne enveloped her, bringing with it a feeling of home she had never experienced before. "I thought," Jake began, his voice choked, "I thought I had lost you." Beth pulled away slightly, just enough to look into his eyes. "I promised I'd return," she said softly. "And I always keep my promises." Jake smiled, that smile she loved so much. "I should have known. After all, you're the most stubborn soldier girl I've ever met." They laughed together, and for a moment, the outside world, with all its complications and uncertainties, disappeared. It was just Beth and Jake, reunited after weeks of separation and fear. As they talked, recounting the events of the last few weeks, Beth felt something change within her. The line that previously separated her military life from her personal life began to blur. For the first time, she could glimpse a future where these two worlds coexisted, not in conflict, but in harmony. When Jake finally had to leave, promising to return the next day, Beth found herself facing a new reality. Her recovery would not only be physical but also emotional. She would have to learn to balance duty with desire, military discipline with the freedom to love. Lying in her hospital bed, watching the sunset through the window, Beth smiled. The path ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time she was eager to face it. With Jake by her side and a new understanding of herself, Beth knew she was ready for any battle that came. Night fell, bringing with it the promise of a new day, a new chapter in her life. And Beth, the soldier who was learning to be more than just her rank, fell asleep with a smile on her lips, dreaming of the possibilities that tomorrow would bring. The days in the hospital turned into weeks, each marking slow but steady progress in Beth's recovery. Jake's daily visits became the highlight of her days, bringing color and life to the sterile hospital environment. During these visits, they talked about everything and nothing. Jake updated her on the events of the outside world, told jokes to make her laugh, and sometimes simply held her hand in a comfortable silence. It was during one of these visits that Beth finally gathered the courage to address the subject that had been circling her thoughts. "Jake," she began, her voice a bit hesitant, "what happens when I leave here?" He looked at her, a mixture of curiosity and concern in his eyes. "What do you mean?" Beth took a deep breath. "I mean, us. This," she gestured between them. "What are we? What do we want to be?" Jake was silent for a moment, pondering her. Words then, with a soft smile, he took her hand. "Beth, I know everything happened very fast between us, but what I feel for you is real. More real than anything I've ever felt before." He paused, his eyes fixed on hers. "I want to be with you. I want to see where this can lead us, but only if that's what you want too." Beth's heart raced at his words. It was scary and exciting at the same time, this promise of a future together. "I want that," she replied softly. "But Jake, you have to understand, the army is an important part of who I am. I can't simply leave that behind." Jake nodded, his gaze serious. "I know, and I wouldn't ask that of you. What I admire in you, Beth, is precisely that passion, that dedication. I don't want to change who you are. I want to be by your side, supporting you, whatever path you choose." His words touched Beth deeply. For the first time, she felt she could have both, her career and true love. The days that followed brought new challenges. As Beth grew stronger physically, she also faced difficult decisions about her future. long conversations with her superior. Colonel Hayes helped her chart a new path. "Commander Daniels," the colonel said during one of his visits, "your acts of bravery have not gone unnoticed. The High Command is considering promoting you and offering you a position as an instructor at the military academy." The news caught Beth by surprise. It was an incredible opportunity, a chance to share her experience and shape the next generation of soldiers. But it also meant a significant change in her career. That would keep me closer to home, wouldn't it?" she asked, immediately thinking of Jake. The colonel smiled, understanding. "Yes, it would mean fewer field missions and more time at the base, but it's an important decision, Beth. Take some time to think about it." That night, Beth shared the news with Jake. His reaction was one of pure support and happiness for her. "This is amazing." "Beth," he exclaimed, using the nickname he had recently started to adopt, "you would be a fantastic instructor." Beth smiled, grateful for his enthusiasm. "You really think so?" "Of course," Jake replied, his tone serious. "You have so much to teach, so much experience to share, and—" He hesitated for a moment. "Selfishly, I'm happy that this would mean having you around more frequently." They laughed together, and Beth felt a wave of certainty invade her. This was the right path for her, a way to honor her commitment to the army while making room for a fuller personal life. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Beth accepted the promotion and the new position, diving headfirst into preparations for her new role. Jake was by her side every step of the way, offering support, laughter, and sometimes a necessary dose of reality. Finally, the day came for Beth to leave the hospital. As she packed her things, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From betrayed wife to survivor of a dangerous mission, from dedicated soldier to a rediscovered woman, each step had led her to this moment. Jake was waiting for her outside, a radiant smile on his face. "Ready to go home, soldier girl?" Beth paused, considering his words. Home. It was no longer just a place, but a person. Jake had become her home. "Yes," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his. "I'm ready to go home." As they walked together, out of the hospital, Beth felt a mixture of emotions: gratitude for the past that had shaped her, joy for the present she was living, and hope for the future she was building. The sun shone brightly outside, as if welcoming this new phase of her life. Beth took a deep breath, feeling the fresh air in her lungs. It was a new beginning, a chance to rewrite her story without abandoning who she was. With Jake by her side, and a future full of possibilities ahead, Beth took the first step toward her new life, a life that promised to be as exciting and rewarding as any mission she had ever faced. And so, hand in hand, Beth and Jake walked toward the future, ready to face together any challenge that life might present them. The months that followed brought a completely new routine for Beth. The transition from field soldier to instructor at the military academy was challenging, but incredibly rewarding. She discovered a talent for teaching that she didn't even know she possessed, inspiring the cadets with her stories of courage and leadership. On a sunny Saturday morning, Beth was sitting on the porch of the house she now shared with Jake, reviewing some lesson plans. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air when Jake appeared, carrying 2 steaming cups. "Working on the weekend again, soldier girl?" he asked, handing her one of the cups. Beth smiled, gratefully accepting the coffee. "Just some final adjustments. I want Monday's strategy class to be perfect." Jake sat beside her, his eyes shining with a mixture of admiration and amusement. "You know you're already the favorite. Instructor of the cadets, right? I heard they even created an unofficial fan club for Commander Daniels." Beth laughed, shaking her head. "Don't exaggerate. They just respect the experience, that's all." "Don't be modest," Jake insisted, leaning in to place a soft kiss on her cheek. "You're amazing at what you do. You're inspiring." The compliment warmed Beth's heart. Even after months together, Jake's words still had the power to make her feel special. "Speaking of inspiration," Jake continued, his tone changing to something more serious, "I've been thinking, what do you think about us taking a vacation?" Beth raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Vacation, the 2 of us?" "Yes, why not?" Jake smiled. You've been working tirelessly since you took on the new position. You deserve a rest. And I would love to spend some time just with you, away from everything." The idea was tempting. Beth hadn't taken a vacation in years, always putting duty above everything. But now with Jake, she was learning to better balance her life. "You know what? Let's do this," she decided, a smile spreading across her face. "Where do you want to go?" Jake's eyes shone with enthusiasm. "How about the beach? Sun, sea, long walks in the sand. We can rent a little house by the sea for a week or two." The image was idyllic, and Beth found herself longing for it more than she expected. "Sounds perfect," she agreed. The following weeks were filled with enthusiastic planning. Beth organized her classes so another instructor could cover for her, while Jake took care of the trip details. Anticipation grew with each passing day. Finally, the big day arrived. As they drove toward the coast, Beth felt a mixture of excitement and a strange anxiety. It was the first time in years that she completely distanced herself from her military responsibilities. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked, noticing her silence. Beth hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's strange. Part of me is excited about this vacation, but another part feels almost guilty for taking time for myself." Jake extended his hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "Hey, you deserve this more than anyone. Allow yourself to relax and enjoy, okay?" His words, as always, calmed her nerves. Beth nodded, determined to fully embrace this new experience. The little beach house Jake had rented was a dream. Situated on a semi-deserted beach, it offered a stunning view of the ocean and total privacy. In the first few days, Beth found herself struggling against the impulse to check emails or call the base. But gradually, helped by Jake's patience and good humor, she began to truly relax. They spent their days exploring the beach, swimming in the crystal-clear waters, and simply enjoying each other's company. At night, they sat on the porch, drinking wine and talking under the stars. It was during one of these nights that Jake surprised Beth with an unexpected question. "Beth," he began, his voice soft, "have you ever thought about having children?" The question caught Beth by surprise. Children were something she had dismissed long ago, considering it incompatible with her military career. "I honestly, no," she admitted. "I always thought my life didn't have room for that." Jake nodded, understanding. "And now, with the changes in your career with us?" Beth was silent for a moment, really considering the idea for the first time. "I don't know," she finally replied. "Is it something you want?" "I would love to have a family with you someday," Jake said softly. "But only if it's something you want too. There's no rush, no pressure. I just wanted to know if it's something we could consider for the future." His words awakened something in Beth, a possibility that she had never really contemplated before. An image of a small family, her, Jake, and perhaps a child with his eyes and her smile, began to form in her mind. "Maybe," she replied, surprising herself with the softness in her voice. "Maybe it's something for us to consider in the future." Jake's smile illuminated the night. He pulled her closer, wrapping her in a tight hug. "That's all I could ask for," he murmured against her hair. That night, lying in Jake's arms, Beth reflected on how much her life had changed. From a soldier focused exclusively on her career, she had transformed into a woman who now considered possibilities that before seemed unattainable. With a smile on her lips, she finally fell asleep, the soft sounds of the ocean still echoing in her ears. The vacation continued, each day bringing new discoveries, not only about the place where they were, but about themselves and their relationship. Beth found herself laughing more, worrying less, and truly living in the moment. When the time came to return home, Beth felt a mixture of emotions. She was eager to return to the work she loved, but also felt a pang of sadness to leave behind this little paradise they had created. "Don't worry," Jake said, as if reading her thoughts. "We can come back whenever we want and take a bit of this paradise with us." Beth smiled, understanding what he meant. The true paradise wasn't the place, but what they had built together. As they packed their things and prepared for the journey, back, Beth felt renewed and full of hope for the future. A future that now seemed full of infinite possibilities, all of them bright and promising. With one last look at the ocean, Beth got into the car, ready to face whatever life had in store for her. But this time she wouldn't face it alone. With Jake by her side, she felt ready for any adventure that might come. The return to routine after the vacation brought with it a new energy for Beth. She returned to her classes at the military academy with renewed enthusiasm, incorporating into her lessons not just her vast field experience, but also a new perspective on balance and personal well-being. One day, after a particularly intense class on decision-making in crisis situations, Beth was approached by a young cadet, Melissa. "Carter, Commander Daniels," Melissa began, hesitant. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" Beth nodded, noting the anxiety in the young woman's eyes. "Of course, Cadet Carter. What can I do for you?" Melissa took a deep breath before speaking. "It's just that I'm having doubts about my career choice. I always dreamed of serving, but sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough for it." The cadet's words touched Beth deeply, reminding her of her own doubts at the beginning of her career. "Melissa," Beth began, her voice gentle but firm, "strength isn't just physical, it's mental, emotional. It's about perseverance and adaptability. Believe me, I had my own doubts along the way." Melissa's eyes widened with the revelation. "You, Commander, but you always seem so confident." Beth smiled, remembering her own journey. Confidence comes with time and experience, but it also comes from knowing yourself, your strengths and weaknesses. The important thing is to never stop growing, never stop learning. The words seemed to calm Melissa, who nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Commander, that helps a lot." As she watched the young cadet walk away, Beth reflected on how her own perspective had changed. She was no longer just the tough soldier she once was. Now she was a mentor, capable of offering not just technical knowledge but also life wisdom. That night, sharing dinner with Jake, Beth told him about her conversation with Melissa. "You know," she said, playing with the food on her plate, "sometimes I wonder if I'm making a real difference in these young people's lives." Jake looked at her with a mixture of admiration and affection. "Beth, you're shaping the next generation of leaders. Of course you're making a difference." His words warmed Beth's heart, but also awakened an idea that had been forming in her mind for some time. "Jake," she began, hesitant, "I've been thinking about something. What would you think if I started a mentoring program for women in the Army?" Jake's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. "That would be amazing, Beth. You have so much to offer, so much experience to share." Encouraged by his support, Beth elaborated. "It would be a space to discuss the unique challenges that women face in the armed forces. Leadership, balance between career and personal life, overcoming prejudices. And who better to lead that than you?" Jake completed, his pride evident. In the days that followed, Beth dove headfirst into planning her new project. She met with superiors, drafted proposals, and began recruiting other female officers to help. The mentoring program was launched a few months later with an overwhelmingly positive response. Women of all ranks signed up, eager to learn and share experiences. During one of the first sessions, Beth found herself in front of a diverse group of women, all looking at her with expectation. "Ladies," she began, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement, "we are here not just to discuss career strategies, but to create a support network, a space where we can be vulnerable, honest, and above all, grow together." The words flowed naturally, and Beth found herself sharing not just her victories but also her moments of doubt and failure. She talked about the challenges of balancing her personal life with her military career, about how she learned to accept help, and the importance of taking care of herself. As the sessions progressed, Beth witnessed remarkable transformations. She saw young recruits gaining confidence, experienced officers finding new inspiration in their careers, and genuine camaraderie forming among the participants. One day, after a particularly emotional session where they discussed the personal sacrifices of military life, one of the older participants, Major Wilson, approached Beth. "Commander Daniels," she said, her voice choked with emotion, I want you to know that what you're doing here is changing lives. I had been considering leaving the army, but now I feel I can make a difference." The Major's words hit Beth deeply. It was confirmation that her work was really making a difference, not just in the institution, but in the individual lives of these women. That night, sharing the day's events with Jake, Beth felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond any successful mission she had ever led. "I'm so proud of you, Beth," Jake said, pulling her into a tight hug. "You're really changing the game." Beth smiled against his chest, feeling a wave of gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you, you know. Your support, your understanding, it means everything." Jake pulled away slightly, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made Beth's heart jump. "We're a team, remember? I'll always be here for you, no matter what." In that moment, wrapped in Jake's arms and reflecting on all she had accomplished, Beth felt a deep certainty. She had found her purpose, not just as a soldier or instructor, but as a mentor and agent of change. The path ahead would still bring challenges, she knew, but with Jake by her side and a new generation of strong women rising under her guidance, Beth felt ready to face any obstacle. As the night progressed, Beth and Jake remained embraced, talking about dreams, plans, and the future they were building together. It was a bright future, full of possibilities, and Beth could hardly wait to see what would come next. The success of Beth's mentoring program did not go unnoticed by the high ranks of the army. On an autumn morning, she was summoned to a meeting with General Thompson, a respected and influential figure in the armed forces. "Commander Daniels," the general began, his tone serious but with a gleam of approval in his eyes, "your work has been remarkable, not just as an instructor, but especially with the mentoring program for women." Beth nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and apprehension. "Thank you, sir. It has been a rewarding experience." The general leaned forward, his next words catching Beth by surprise. "We are considering expanding the program nationally, and we would like you to lead this expansion." Beth's heart raced. It was an incredible opportunity, a chance to positively impact the lives of thousands of women in the armed forces across the country. "This is an honor, sir," she responded, trying to maintain her composure. "There's just one detail," the general continued, his expression becoming more serious. "The new position would require your transfer to Washington, D.C. It would be a permanent move." The news hit Beth like a bucket of cold water. Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, thousands of miles away. Away from everything she had built in the last few months. Away from Jake. "I understand it's an important decision," the general added, noting her hesitation. "You have a week to think about it and give me your answer." Beth left the general's office with her mind in turmoil. The opportunity was incredible, something she could only have dreamed of a few years ago, but the price seemed too high. That night she shared the news with Jake. Sitting on the porch of their home, the place where so many important conversations had happened, Beth observed the emotions pass across his face: surprise, pride, and finally concern. "Wow, Beth," Jake finally spoke, his voice a mixture of admiration and apprehension. "This is amazing. You really deserve this recognition." Beth held his hand, feeling the familiar comfort of his touch. "But it means leaving all this behind, leaving you." Jake was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but firm. "Beth, I can't make this decision for you, but I want you to know that no matter what you choose, I support you." His words caught her by surprise. You would go with me to Washington?" Jake's gaze softened. "If that's what you want, yes. We're a team, remember, but I also don't want you to decline this opportunity because of me." The days that followed were an emotional roller coaster for Beth. She found herself weighing the pros and cons, imagining alternative futures. On one hand, the chance to lead a national change, to really make a difference on a large scale. But the other, the life she had built here, the balance she had finally found between career and personal life. On a particularly difficult afternoon, Beth decided to visit the place where it all began, Jake's house, where she had taken refuge after discovering Richard's betrayal. Sitting on the same garden bench where they had shared so many conversations, she allowed herself to relive her entire journey. She remembered how broken and lost she was at that time, how Jake, with his irreverent humor and unconditional support, helped her rediscover herself. She thought about how her career had flourished, not despite her relationship, but partly thanks to it. It was there, in that garden full of memories, that Beth had her epiphany. Her strength came not just from her career or her military achievements, it came also from love, from the support and partnership she had found with Jake. With sudden clarity, Beth knew what she needed to do. She ran back home, finding Jake in the kitchen, preparing dinner. "Jake," she called, slightly breathless from the run, "I've made my decision." He turned, expectation clear in his eyes. "And what is it?" "I'm going to decline the offer," she said, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. "What we've built here, what we have together, is more valuable to me than any promotion." Jake looked at her with a mixture of surprise and emotion. "Beth, are you sure? I don't want you to regret it later." Beth smiled, feeling more certain than ever. "Absolutely. I can make a difference here too, and with you by my side, I feel I can conquer anything." Jake pulled her into a tight hug, his words muffled against her hair. "I love you so much, Beth. So much." It was the first time he had said those words, and Beth felt her heart expand with a wave of emotion. "I love you too, Jake," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "More than I ever thought possible." That night, as they dined and talked about the future, Beth felt at peace with her decision. She knew that other challenges would come, other opportunities would present themselves. But now she was certain that with Jake by her side, she could face anything. The mentoring program would continue to grow and impact lives, even if on a smaller scale than the national proposal. And Beth was determined to continue making a difference, one day at a time, one life at a time. When they went to bed that night, embraced and happy, Beth felt a deep gratitude for all the difficulties that had led her here, for all the choices she had made, and for the love she had found when she least expected it. The future was bright and full of possibilities, and Beth could hardly wait to see what awaited them. The dawn brought with it a sense of renewal for Beth. She awakened before sunrise as usual, but this time she didn't feel the military compulsion to immediately get dressed and start the day. Instead, she remained in bed, observing Jake sleeping peacefully beside her. His face, relaxed in sleep, seemed younger, more vulnerable. Beth found herself smiling at the sight. This man, who had entered her life in such an unexpected way, had become her anchor, her safe harbor in the midst of life's storms. With gentle movements, so as not to wake him, Beth slipped out of bed and headed to the kitchen. She prepared coffee and walked out to the porch, savoring the first rays of sunlight breaking the horizon. The decision to decline the Washington offer still felt right. Beth knew she could still make a difference here, continuing the mentoring program, guiding the next generation of female soldiers, and finding new ways to improve the institution she so loved. As she enjoyed the peaceful morning, Beth reflected on her journey. From the young idealistic recruit to the betrayed wife, from the near-death experience to the new life she was building with Jake. Each step, each challenge, had shaped her into who she was today. "Good morning, beautiful," Jake's voice interrupted her musings. He appeared at the porch door, his hair disheveled, a sleepy smile on his face. "Good morning," Beth replied, her heart warming at the sight of him. Jake joined her, placing a soft kiss on her temple before sitting beside her. "Already planning world domination at this hour?" Beth laughed, the sound light and free. "Not exactly, just thinking about how grateful I am. For everything." Jake looked at her, a serious but tender expression on his face. "You know, Beth, I've been thinking too, about our conversation yesterday, about what you're giving up by staying here." A slight frown formed on Beth's forehead. "Jake, I told you, I'm at peace with my decision. The Washington position is a great opportunity, but not worth the cost." I know, he assured, taking her hand in his. And I'm not trying to change your mind, but I was thinking about something else entirely. Beth looked at him, curious. What? Jake shifted a bit, seeming suddenly nervous, a rare display for him. I was thinking about us, about the future, about how no matter where we are, what really matters is that we're together. Before Beth could respond, Jake slid from the chair to one knee, taking a small box from his pocket. Beth Daniels, he began, his voice slightly trembling. When you showed up at my door that night, I never imagined how much you would change my life. You've shown me what true strength is, what it means to love someone with your whole heart. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, supporting your dreams, sharing your joys and challenges. Will you marry me? Beth felt her breath catch. As Jake opened the box, revealing a delicate ring with a single diamond that caught the morning light. Jake, she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Before you answer, he quickly added, I want you to know that this doesn't change anything about the DC position. If you want to reconsider, we'll go together. As long as we're together, I'm home. The B. Tears spilled freely down Beth's cheeks now, but they were tears of joy. In that moment, all her life's choices, all the paths she had taken, seemed to converge on this perfect point in time. Yes, she finally answered, her voice firm despite the emotion. Yes, Jake, I will marry you. With a smile that could outshine the sun, Jake slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he stood, pulling Beth into an embrace that spoke of promises, of a shared future, of an unshakable love. As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms with the new day spreading before them, Beth felt a sense of completeness she had never known before. Her life, which had once seemed so strictly defined by duty and discipline, now stretched out before her, rich with possibilities and love. The path ahead would certainly bring new challenges, but with Jake by her side, Beth knew she could face anything. They were a team, partners in the truest sense of the word, and together they would build a life filled with purpose, joy, and above all, love. The news of Beth and Jake's engagement spread quickly, bringing a wave of congratulations from colleagues and friends. To the surprise of many, even Richard sent a brief note, wishing them happiness, a gesture that Beth accepted with gracious maturity. Planning for the wedding became a joyful project for both. They decided on a small ceremony, intimate and meaningful, to be held in the garden of their home. Jake, who revealed an unexpected talent for organization, took charge of most of the arrangements, while Beth continued her work at the academy and with the mentoring program. One afternoon, a few weeks before the wedding, Beth received a visitor at her office, Major Wilson, one of the first participants in the mentoring program. Commander Daniels, the Major greeted, a warm smile on her face. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Major, Beth replied, gesturing to a chair. What can I do for you? The Major sat, straightening her uniform with a gesture that betrayed her nervousness. I wanted to personally thank you, Commander. The mentoring program, it saved my career. More than that, it saved me. Beth felt a wave of emotion at the Major's words. I'm glad it's been helpful to you, Major, but you did the hard work yourself. Major Wilson shook her head, a determined look in her eyes. You gave us a space, a voice. You showed us that we didn't have to choose between being strong and being human. She paused, her expression softening. And I wanted to congratulate you on your engagement. It's another example of how you lead by living, showing us that we can have both a fulfilling career and a personal life. After the Major left, Beth sat for a long time at her desk, reflecting on their conversation. The idea that her own journey could inspire others, could help them navigate their own paths, filled her with a profound sense of purpose. That evening, when she shared the conversation with Jake, his reaction was one of immense pride. You see, this is why I love you, he said, pulling her into an embrace. You don't just talk about making a difference, you actually do it, every single day. As the wedding day approached, Beth found herself reflecting more and more on her journey. From the rigid, duty-focused soldier she once was, to the woman she had become, still strong, still dedicated, but now also open to love, to vulnerability, to a fuller life. When the day finally arrived, It dawned clear and beautiful, as if nature itself was celebrating with them. Beth stood in their bedroom, looking at herself in the mirror. She had chosen a simple but elegant dress, nothing like the traditional wedding gown. It was uniquely her, elegant yet practical, beautiful without pretense. A knock at the door announced the arrival of her maid of honor, Major Wilson, who had become a close friend over the months. "You look stunning, Beth," the Major said, using her first name as Beth had insisted on for the day. "Thank you, Sarah," Beth replied, a mixture of nerves and excitement coursing through her. As they walked together towards the garden, Beth caught glimpses of the gathered guests, colleagues from the academy, participants from the mentoring program, a few of Jake's friends. It was small, just as they wanted, but filled with people who truly cared for them. Then she saw him, Jake, standing under an arch of flowers, looking more handsome than she had ever seen him. The moment their eyes met, everything else faded away. The nervousness, the uncertainties all disappeared, replaced by a certainty so profound it seemed to resonate in her very bones. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises not of blind obedience or traditional roles, but of partnership, of support, of a love that respected and celebrated each other's strengths and dreams. When they were pronounced husband and wife, and Jake kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes, Beth knew she had found her true north. Not in the rigid discipline of the military, not in the expectations of others, but in the love of a man who saw her for who she truly was, and who loved her not despite her strength, but because of it. The celebration that followed was filled with laughter, with music, with the joy of friends sharing in their happiness. As evening fell and lights twinkled in the garden, Jake pulled Beth onto the makeshift dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. "How does it feel, Mrs. Adams?" he whispered as they swayed to the gentle music. Beth smiled, savoring the sound of her new name. "Perfect," she replied, "like coming home after a long journey." Jake's eyes softened, filled with so much love that it almost overwhelmed her. "That's what you are to me, Beth. Home. No matter where we go, what we face, as long as we're together, I'm home." As the night deepened, stars appearing in the velvet sky above, Beth and Jake slipped away from the celebration, walking hand in hand to the quiet of their porch. There, looking out at the garden filled with friends and twinkling lights, they shared a private moment of reflection. "Did you ever imagine, that night you showed up at my door, that we'd end up here?" Jake asked, his arm wrapped around her waist. Beth leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her. "Never," she admitted, "but I'm so grateful for the path that led me to you, even the difficult parts." "Me too," Jake said, placing a gentle kiss on her forehead, "and I can't wait to see where our path leads next." As they stood there, wrapped in the quiet joy of the moment, Beth felt a sense of peace she had never known before. Her life had been transformed, not by abandoning who she was, but by embracing a fuller version of herself. As a soldier, as a mentor, as a wife, as a woman. With Jake by her side, the future stretched out before them, full of possibilities, challenges, and above all, love. And Beth knew with a certainty that ran so deep that together they could face anything that came their way. The night embraced them, stars witnessed to their quiet joy as Beth and Jake stood at the threshold of their new life together, a life built on respect, on partnership, and on a love that honored the strength in each other.